Okay, let's start with Doug's diagnosis was what?
Okay, so the neurologist and the neurosurgeon were meeting, and they called me and asked me if Doug had ever been diagnosed with malignant melanoma. And I said yes, that he had. And they said, well, that was the missing piece. With that piece, they could diagnose Doug with Dandy Walker syndrome. And Dandy Walker syndrome is a disease, is a condition that is usually diagnosed in young children who were born with hydrocephalus, and it has to do with the area of the brain where the fluid is collected. I mean, you have several ventricles in your brain where fluid can collect, and if they collect in this spot in the back of your head back here, then that's typical of Dandy Walker syndrome. And so Doug was born with this condition, and as he progressed, it caused him to have problems with dementia, hallucinations, delusions, panic attacks.
Everything he would have hated.
Everything he would have hated and everything he would have denied. He would sometimes say to me, I'm going to the city council in Seaside, which is where our beach house is.
Mhm.
He would say, I'm going to go to the city council because those police had no right to come in our house. And I'd say, what police? Those police that came in the other day. And I'd say, Doug, the police didn't come. Yes, they did. You know they did. And I'd say, no, they didn't. And I didn't want him to go to the city council and embarrass himself with, and at one time he was going to go to the church and make sure Spencer got fired. And because Spencer preached on, he used the scripture that talks of where Paul's talking about circumcision and the wish that people would just emasculate themselves if they were going to have this thinking thought processes. And Doug didn't like that. He didn't think it was appropriate, and he didn't want Spencer to be allowed to talk like that in church. And he was irate. I don't know if you've noticed that sometimes in Bible study, Spencer will talk about something that is ultimately going to show up in the sermon next Sunday, or maybe a Bible study, he talks about something that ultimately was in last Sunday's sermon, because he's been studying and that stuff is fresh in his mind. So Spencer not only said this in Bible study, but he said it in church. And I could see Doug fuming. I mean, I could see him in Bible study, hitting his fist on the table and wrapping his fingers, and I could feel the tension just building in him. And I was so glad to get him out of Bible study before he exploded. But he did explode ultimately, but just not in Bible study. He exploded with me on the way home, and he was going to go to the board and have Spencer fired. And I thought, what do I do? I mean, Doug's just going to embarrass himself at the board. People that he respects and admire are going to see this side of Doug that would really be embarrassing for him if people saw this. So I made an appointment and went and talked to Spencer. And he said, well, it's in the Bible. I said, I know, Spencer, but as long as Doug was alive, Spencer never preached on that again, never mentioned that. And he said, I explained to him what was going on, and he said he would try not to preach on that. But if God preach on that, you pretty much have to preach on that. So
how many years was Doug in that state, if I mean, I remember meeting with you at Joanne's and stuff, and it was intense.
Yeah,
Scary.
yeah. Well, it just got progressively worse and worse. You know, things that were little at first started getting bigger and more frequent and more common. At one time, he threw me out of the house with all my clothes on. He came into the bedroom when I was asleep, and he drugged me out of the house and locked me out. And and I didn't even know why he was mad. I found out later why he was mad. That was the 4th of July weekend, and we actually had the police out to the house twice that weekend. And then the next day when I was at work, he was still really angry with me. And I was delivering mail, one of those community boxes where you just have to reach your hand out. And I saw Doug's car pulling up alongside my mail truck. And he pulled up beside me and rolled the windows down in the car and just started screaming obscenities at me, just screaming obscenities, horrible things. And, you know, I was trying to work, and I was trying, you know, to just carry on with life. I knew that things were not good. So at that point, I just said, okay, God, what do you expect me to do about my marriage? I mean, I said it out loud, and it was like from the back of my mail truck comes this voice that says, I expect you to be faithful. I turned around to look and see if my supervisor was sitting behind me in the truck. I mean, it was.
Did I hear that right?
I expect you to be faithful.
Wow.
Well, you know, what I wanted God to say was, I don't expect you to put up with this. I think you should leave.
Yeah.
But that's not what he said at all. So I expect you to be faithful. So, and I knew that he didn't mean just faithful to him, but faithful to my commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay, God, well, I can do that. And then I got a few blocks down the street, and I said, but what about my happiness? Mm-hmm. And he said, I didn't tell you to be happy. I told you to be faithful.
Oh, hard words.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent a lot of time studying about the difference in happiness and joy. And in spite of the fact that, you know, people who really knew me and knew what was going on thought I should leave the marriage, I knew I had to stay because it was a pretty clear message from God. And Doug continued to get worse. They did ultimately put the shunt in his brain. After we went into the doctor one day for an appointment, and Doug could not use his legs at all anymore. The doctor said, oh my God, when did he become a quadriplegic? I said, it's been happening over time. That's where we are now. And he said, well, we have to put that shunt in no matter what the risk. So they did put the shunt in, and we got a few months relief from the shunt, maybe 2 or 3 months relief from the shunt. But the problem with the shunt was that after they put the shunt in, Doug no longer knew who I was. They put the shunt in February. And of course, you know, Doug was a tax audit supervisor. So doing the taxes was really a big deal to Doug. And I knew we weren't ready to do the taxes because Doug had been sick, had been in the hospital, had been in rehab. And I knew that we did not have all of our ducks in a row to do the taxes. But I thought the only way for Doug to realize that is if I let him sit down at the computer and try to do the taxes. Then he'll see that we're not ready. Mm-hmm. So we had 2 computers in the den, and he would work at one computer, and then I would be reading off the numbers off the W-2s and things. And he got to he got to like the third question on the tax form where it says your marital status. And he just sat there, and I said, "What's the matter, Doug?" He said, "I don't know how to answer this question." And I said, "You're a tax audit supervisor. What question don't you understand?" He said, "This one." And I said, "Which one?" And he said, "This one." He said, "About being married." He said, "I'm not married to you." And I was just so hurt. I was just devastated.
Mhm.
I said, "Doug, I have to leave for a while. I have to go take a ride in the car. I'll be back, but I'm going to be gone for 30 minutes or an hour. I just have to go get some air." I came back, and he realized that he had hurt me with what he said,
Mm.
but he never did know what our
Mm.
relationship was. And I sent the neurosurgeon, that one who put the shunt in, a text message. And I said, "Couldn't you have put that shunt in the part of his brain that remembered his ex-wife and not the part that remembers me?"
Oh my, Mason. Oh goodness.
Anyway, the last, Doug lived about a year or maybe a year and a half after the shunt, and it was pretty much all downhill. I tried to take care of Doug at home as much as I could, because I knew that's what he wanted, and that's really what I wanted for him. But he didn't sleep at night. I mean, he would doze, but about every 10 or 12 minutes, he would get me up. He'd wake me up to take him to the bathroom.
Mhm.
And I would get him in his wheelchair and wheel him into the bathroom, and he would say, "What am I doing here?" Or, "Where am I supposed to go at?" I mean, it's like we were right in front of the toilet. I don't know what I'm doing here. And I bought some side rails for the bed, and he fought against those. It was just like trying to cage a wild animal.
Mhm.
And so I couldn't leave the bed rails on. And if I didn't get him up, he would try to get up himself, and he would fall. And I
Mhm.
knew that there was a limit to how often the fire department was going to come pick him up off the floor. You
Yeah.
know, I,
Yes.
I'll be pushing the limit.
So what did you end up doing?
Well, my sister talked to me. My sister is a retired hospice social worker. And she said, "You don't fail Doug until you fail to get him the care he needs."
Mhm.
And that was really helpful to me, because that sort of gave me permission to put him in a facility where he would get the care he needs,
Well,
because
you needed sleep.
I needed sleep. I would fall asleep driving him to the doctor. I'd be sitting at a red light, and I'd fall asleep.
Yeah.
And then, maybe Doug would say, "The light has changed. You should go." Somebody behind me would honk, or, and I'd startle awake.
Yeah.
And it just couldn't go on. It just couldn't go on. But even in the care facility, I was there all day, every single day, because what I found out was, if you're not, they don't get good care.
I know. Yep. 13 years old mom. Yep.
I would every day I would stop at Mart, and I would buy bags of candy, and I would put them in Doug's room, way back around the corner, where he had to come in the room to see the candy and get it out of the big candy jar, because that way, if Doug was on the floor, if he'd fallen out of bed or something, whoever was coming in to fill their pockets with candy would notice. And
Yeah.
so every day I would spend $12, $15 on bags of candy. And every day when I got there again, it was gone. There was not a single piece left.
Oh my. I remember having people tell me, "You don't need to go see her." I pretty much went every day. Sometimes I skipped a day, but pretty much every day. And I believe that they meant well. I don't think they were caregivers,
Right.
because I couldn't trust. I mean, I found her too many times, not taken care
Exactly.
of.
Doug was always really particular about
Yeah.
his teeth. Yeah, I mean, he
Mhm.
really cared for his teeth. And he was meticulous. So when I made arrangements for him to go into the care facility, I um, I talked to them about his oral hygiene and the fact that they would need to be diligent about that. And they charged me an extra $100 a month for oral hygiene.
Oh my.
So I would go and the toothbrush would be dry and in exactly the same location where it had been the day before. And clearly there was not, forget the extra oral hygiene, there was no oral hygiene happening. And so I went to the director of nursing and I said, I'm paying extra for Doug to get oral hygiene. And I said, his teeth haven't been brushed for 3 days. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. So she went in and, made sure. And there was one day, Doug had been nauseated in the night. I mean, in the middle of the night, like 3 o'clock in the morning. And then it was 7 o'clock at night, the following day, and they hadn't fed him. And they said, well, he was sick in his stomach. I said, that was hours ago. He needs to eat. Well, the kitchen is closed now. And I said, well, let's open it up and fix him some dinner.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I said, I'm going out to eat. And I said, I'm going to the restaurant to eat. And when I get back, Doug better have had his dinner. So the person who owned the facility went in the kitchen and whipped up something to feed Doug. But I mean, if you don't,
Don't.
well,
Mhm.
it's not going to happen.
No.
I was there all day, every day.
Wow. Wow. I had mom on when I entered the facility with her, beginning 2-hour checks.
Mhm.
Every 2 hours, they had to go to her room just to see, is she wet? Does she need anything? Because she couldn't speak a lot at that point. Well, I eventually put up a video, and the facility knew I put up a video in her room. And so one day I looked at the video, and somebody that came in at 5 a.m. just went down the form and signed that she had made down all the 2-hour checks, and she had never been checked at all that night.
Right. Yeah.
Well, so I went to the administrator, of course, and they let her go. I was surprised, but I thought, you can't do that. That's a person's life here.
I know. Yeah.
You did awesome to go every day. That's amazing.
And the only reason I went home at night was because we had dogs, and and they had to be let out. And
yeah. Okay, let's go on to just touch base just a short time on your mission trips, because your life, you're adventurous.
Well, I don't remember when I took the first one, but 5 or 6 years ago, I came across an organization on Facebook that was doing medical mission trips to Guatemala. And 2 people that I know and respect had commented on this organization, what a good organization it was and how they supported it financially and prayerfully. And I thought, well, if these people that I know and trust like this organization, maybe this is an organization that I can work with as well.
Mhm.
I mean, I still had this desire, for missions that I think God put on my heart. So I contacted them and I told them that my nursing skills were very old and outdated, and I didn't feel confident in going and doing nursing, but that I would like to go in some regard and some aspect of their service. And so they assigned me to be the pharmacist. And and so I'm like the pharmacist. And so I go, and the nurse practitioners and the doctors who are there seeing the people will write prescriptions, and then with the medications that I have available to me, I will fill those prescriptions. And in my bad Spanish, I will try to give instructions on how to use that medicine. And I've been to Guatemala, I think 4 times, and Ecuador once, and I'm going back to Guatemala in in February for another trip to see how physically,
Wow.
if I can still handle that. The one of the nice things about this organization is that it's provided me with an amazing support system as an adoptive parent. Most of the people involved in this organization have some connection to adoption because Linda Shepherd, who is the foundation, who is the founder of the Chance to Dream, has, I think, 14 children, 11 of whom are adopted. And she has, she's done a lot of teaching and a lot of training on dealing with children who have trauma background. And by trauma, I don't mean they were in a car accident. I mean, they have some sort of brain trauma from their environment or their birth or their adoption experience. So trauma doesn't necessarily mean a physical injury, but more of an emotional.
Wow.
So because Linda is so involved in the adoption community worldwide, actually, and she brings these medical teams together, a lot of them have adoption experiences. Either they have adopted children or they are adults who were adopted as children, or they're the sister of, you know, a brother who
Wow.
was adopted. And what I have found is that this is the support group that I've needed in my whole life to deal with my children. My friend Erica, who's a nurse practitioner in Indiana and comes and stays with me occasionally, she is adopted, and she's recently found her biological parents, and that has helped me dealing with my children as they've wanted to find their biological relatives and so on. And I just have wonderful friends in this organization and a wonderful support system, as well as going to Guatemala and being the hands and feet of Jesus in these rural villages and communities where they literally have nothing. They feed their children. I mean, they call it tortilla water. They burn tortillas and then scrape the black stuff off and put it in the child's bottle to flavor the water. And a lot of the children don't ever drink water. They get weaned and then they have coffee because the water is such poor quality and they can't afford the milk. So
Wow.
coffee is cheap there because it's Guatemala.
Wow. That's amazing. And I'm so proud of you for doing that and then using your skills really still from
Yeah.
way back. Yeah.
One of the first trips I took, I mean, I was just overwhelmed with the poverty in Guatemala at first. And we had a mother bring her developmentally delayed child into the clinic to see the American doctors, hoping that they could give her some answers. And this mother had a child who was born with some condition, I don't know, but the child was like it had no muscle tone, no cognitive development, not reaching any milestones or markers. And the mother knew that there was something wrong with the baby. She was trying to get help for the baby. She would ride the bus into Guatemala City and see the doctors in the big clinics. And essentially they would just send her back to the village with no answers. And I looked at that mom and that baby, and I just remembered how it was when we adopted Curtis, because we lived in this small town where there were no resources. But what we had that they don't have in Guatemala is we had the resources within ourselves to develop the resources that we needed for our children. We formed, some of us parents of special needs kids got together and formed a nonprofit organization that provided infant toddler stimulation for the young children. And I did that because I wanted to make children with special needs more adoptable. I thought if there were resources, local resources,
Mhm.
that it would be easier, for people to adopt children that had these special needs.
Wow.
And the other ones were, they had had a Down syndrome child or something, but we had no resources in our community until, except for a home teacher that came once a month and said, maybe if you roll a ball to him and he'll roll it back to you. But she knew that it wasn't enough. And so she worked with some of us parents to develop this nonprofit organization that's still there today and has served thousands and thousands of children. The organization is called Pride and Joy Incorporated, which stands for Parents Reinforcing Infant Development and Education. So I looked at this child and I remembered the road that we had traveled. And then I looked at the path in front of her, and there was no way for her to find that kind of strength in her community to build these resources, because there was no pediatrician that you could go call on. There was no social worker at Crippled Children's Society or Easter Seals.
Mhm.
It was just her and this baby, and she was trying desperately to get some help.
Wow. Yeah. You have used what you have learned going forward a lot. I can see. One thing I was going to ask you was, what do you think is the most common myth, just one myth, of caregiving?
Well, you hear people talk about the sandwich generation, after your kids live home, then you have this period of time when you're a caregiver for your aging parents.
Uh-huh.
And I think, to me, that's just not the reality of the situation. For me, caregiving started years and years ago and is going to continue when I'm the one who's needing the care. It's not this little short period of time. This window of caregiving it's a lifetime of caregiving. And I think that there are more people like me than we realize, that it's not just a short-term undertaking.
Yes. Yeah. And I had like a year and a couple days. I thought I was home free after mom passed. And there it is again. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So what do you think is the toughest part about caregiving, and what's the easiest? If you were talking to someone, which you are.
Oh, you're someone now?
No, I mean
she writes a book and she thinks she's someone. I think the toughest part for me was the resistance that I got from Doug's family. And the easiest part for me, I think, was because of my training. I'm not afraid of doctors. I know how to talk to doctors. If I don't like what they say, I tell them they need to say something else. So I think that all of my experiences and my background really facilitated the caregiving aspect for me.
That's great. What's your top 3 values that you live by?
Well, I think integrity is really important. I think I got that from my mother. And commitment, keeping your commitments, and of course, my faith.
And that's what you live by.
Yes.
If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
I think the thing I'm most proud of is the work we did at Pride and Joy Incorporated. I would like to be remembered for my part in developing that organization because it's helped so many people.
Yeah, that's amazing. Out of all the, and that's amazing that you were, that you created that resource for people in such a small area. You know what I mean? You weren't like in a major city
No,
at that.
no.
Yeah. Okay, so if you're face to face with a caregiver, what are the top 5 pieces of advice you'd give them? What's
Well,
doesn't have to be in order.
I think that it's important to take time for yourself, some time to rest and rejuvenate. I think that you need to not be too hard on yourself by second guessing your decisions. If you decide that this is the best way to go, you don't need to beat yourself up wondering if this is the right way to go.
Mm.
I think that you need to make good use of all of your resources, your community resources, and I also think that you need to ask questions of the doctors and the healthcare professionals that are taking care of your loved one. I think that it's important to really protect yourself, as far as having a power of attorney, having an advance directive, having all of your legal documents taken care of for your loved one and yourself as well, so that there's no question about who has authority and who can speak for the loved one. And
Yes, I love those. That's excellent advice. Okay, so I know you're looking forward to going on the mission trip for sure.
yes,
Yeah. And what's your favorite book of the Bible?
Well, I really like the book of Malachi.
Of course you know. I'm thinking, oh, Philippians, Colossians. Malachi, why?
Well, because it's got those scriptures in there about divorce.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, and what is your favorite verse?
Well, it's in Psalm 68, and it's verse 6. Says, God settles the solitary in a home. This is the ESV. So in some versions, it'll say God sets the lonely in homes. But I think that at this stage of my life and at the place where, I've been with my children, that verse just really speaks to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the first part of the verse.
Wow. 68, Psalm 68, 6, and also Malachi. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For agreeing to be interviewed. I know it'll change lives, and thank you for being transparent.
That's me.
It's amazing. And
a fault sometimes, yeah.
No, I don't think so. You just tell it like it is.
That's true.
And I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
And thank you. And I wish you wonderful times on your mission trip again.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm meeting with Cindy this afternoon so we can.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, God bless you. Peace.
Thank you. Okay, now.
Talk to you later. Bye.